It's finally over for UCF basketball. But what did they win in the first ever Crown Invitational Basketball Tournament?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. And thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Joining me is my good friend, Andrew Gluco from The Last Word on Sports, expert purveyor of all things UCF. Andrew, we talked a lot, and I mean a lot, this basketball season about what UCF basketball had to do. Look, they crashed and burned. They wanted every metric wanted to put UCF into the big dance, but they just didn't hold up their end of the bargain. Then they make the Crown Invitational Tournament, and I can say there were a lot of expectations for the Knights heading into this one, but they romped all the way through to the final just to come up short to Nebraska. They lost 77-66. Let's start with a review of this game. We're going to talk about what went wrong and also, what they won later in this segment. But, this was a classic case of UCF, again, running out of gas. Darius Johnson had a tough day, 1 of 11 from the field, my friend, 0 of 5 from 3. He had 1 basket and 2 free throws, and they just aren't. We talked a lot about their depth. They're just not deep enough for him to have a game like this in the final, but he had it. They lost by 11. What did you see when you watched this game?
Well, towards the end of the game, semifinals against Villanova, he tweaked his hammy or something. He pulled up a little lame, and I think that played a role in this one. He just wasn't comfortable. He did not find a groove, and by and large, outside of Jordan Ivory Curry, like nobody found a groove. The stuff that worked against Villanova, nothing was really clicking for against Nebraska, and UCF got hot in the second half. Scoring the first 14 points, and then they just died. Nebraska went on a 24-3 run and just never looked back after that.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough watching them do it. 40% from the field for the Knights in this one. Nebraska shot 48% from the field. But most notably, 7 of 29 from 3, man. They took a lot of threes in this game, did not hit a ton of them, 24% from 3 in this one. Only 6 free throw shot by the Knights in this one versus 17 for Nebraska. I was a little taken back by the free throw disparity. It felt like they weren't getting the calls, my friend.
Well, there's 2 things to note here. One is, the lack of free throws, very unlike UCF to be able to do that. But that part of that is because Darius Johnson struggled, just kind of moving. So he's a really good guy at slashing to the hoop. Couldn't really get into that. And he's good at drawing fouls when he does it. So that was one thing. And the other thing was the increase in turnovers. And Jordan Ivory Curry, who is not a great ball handler, ended up, doing a lot. And as a result, 6 turnovers by himself out of the 12. That's not going to bode well when you need, to get things done. I mean, we watched, the Florida versus Houston game. Turnovers at key points killed the Cougars. It killed the Knights too. When they had a chance to stop the momentum, they turned the ball over. And, it didn't matter if Nebraska wasn't hitting their shots. UCF couldn't even take a shot. They got very sloppy. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jordan Ivory Curry is not a great ball handler and is mistake prone.
Yeah, agreed. College basketball has become such a game of stars. You referenced that Florida versus Houston game. Walter Clayton Jr. was an absolute dazzled through this NCAA tournament. As you know, I was in San Diego covering the Final Four. And so I did not stay for the championship game Monday night. I just went and headed on back after that semi there. Auburn lost in a game to Florida where, again, Walter Clayton Jr. just went absolutely bonkers. Auburn had no answer for him. Nobody had an answer for him all tournament long. If you're UCF, At times, that guy was Keyshawn Hall. Sometimes it was Darius Johnson. Every once in a while, you would get a game like that from Ivy Curry. But if you're Johnny Dawkins, you're looking for that guy. You're looking for that guy in this tournament. And my question to you is, did they find that guy? We talked before this one about the decision Dawkins made to let Nils Mahovsky and Tyler Hendricks compete in this tournament, even though they entered the portal. Now, we know why. They had some very, they had some motivation.
They needed the bodies.
Yeah. We'll talk about their motivations for doing that later. But ultimately, you're hoping that a guy emerges from this. Ivy Curry, 12 of 22 from the field, 29 points. Look, man, without him, you probably get absolutely run off the floor. The only other person in double digits in this game was Nils Mahovsky. He was 50% from the field, 5 of 10 shooting, 13 points. But you just didn't get any production anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, Darius Johnson obviously ended his collegiate career with whimper, which is very depressing. Stand-up guy, very loyal to the program. I mean, you couldn't ask for a worse finish. But the thing that has to be concerning is the second half of this game. UCF acted like they did in the regular season. A lot of me ball instead of we ball. They weren't passing it very well. They were not getting assists. They had 2 assists all in the second half. And, the same problems that they had when they still had Ricky Davis, Keyshawn Hall, a guy who was just an absolute ball hog, started happening. Ivory Curry was channeling his Keyshawn Hall. And, there's a reason why this team did better with Hall gone, because he has a history of not being a good team player. If you have lesser talent, but they play better together, you're going to win games. So, Bruce Pearl is going to have some fun with Hall. And unlike UCF, and people are like, they picked up a great player. Hall is a very incomplete player. He doesn't play defense. He doesn't pass the ball. I'm going to say Bruce Pearl is going to have fun, but at least he has enough, horses in the stable that if the guy doesn't play D, he can ride the pine. UCF couldn't afford that. That's why Hall played as much as he did. But, that's not good team mechanics. Ivory Curry fell into that same role in the second half. Not good team mechanics. Teams suffered as a result. So, they got to go back, because Ivory Curry is coming back for his senior year, and it needs to be drilled in his head that the one-on-one hero ball doesn't work. He's not as good as Keyshawn Hall is on offense. He doesn't handle the ball as well. He's more prone to being chaotic and cause turnovers as a result. So you need a point guard that's going to manage the offense, and they're going to have to reel in Ivory Curry and to be a more complementary player to the rest of the team, as opposed to trying to be a solo star when he's not one.
Yeah, I just wonder if lack of trust, right, like for your teammates, played into some of that hero ball that we saw from Keyshawn Hall. Obviously, he's going to, Bruce Pearl demands a certain type of play. Like, one of the things that's going to be different for him is at Auburn, he's not going to get the type of minutes that he got. This is something that a lot of guys have played for Bruce Pearl have complained about is that, they come there thinking, well, I'm the guy. And there are very few guys who will consistently play over 30 minutes a game in Bruce Pearl's system. Look, there was plenty of opportunity for Hall, Johnson, guys to step up and do their thing. But ultimately, like you said, team ball wins over hero ball, especially in these tournaments. And that's something I think that Johnny Dawkins was looking for in this one. Stood out to me in this one. And now you got 12 turnovers, not a ton in today's college of basketball, but certainly, again, when your margin for error like they're so thin for UCF, that I think that hurt you there. And then they didn't lose the rebounding battle greatly. They won the offensive rebounding battle in this one. Nebraska got out ahead, and nobody was there to help Ivy Curry shoot the basketball, so you never got ahead. Nebraska led for 25 minutes and 33 seconds in this game. There were only 3 lead changes. So it was pretty much just Nebraska the whole way.
Yeah, at UCF, in the first half, kept around. They kept the game close. They tied it, shortly before halftime, and then exploded in the second half. Nebraska just caught flat-footed. I don't know if they, what happened at halftime, but I mean, you scored the first 14 points, and then everything just fell apart. Was it bad strategy? I don't think so. I mean, shots just weren't falling in. There was, a lot that went in and out. I mean, at the end of the day, you can, create the best strategy in the world. If the shots don't fall, the shots don't fall. Yeah. It's, sometimes it's just, the iron unkind, and UCF just, the luck ran out. They had some amazing luck at the end of that Villanova game, and maybe just tapped the well one time too many. I mean, Darius Johnson played amazing ball throughout, the end of this season, and, got tweaked up a bit, and just could not move well enough in this game, end up fouling out. And, you feel bad in the fact that it was an absolute whimper of a finish for a very good career. And he played his entire career at UCF. And you're talking about in the NIL era where transfers are rampant, he never left. And you have to deeply respect that. So to see that happen, I mean, my heart breaks for him because, good guy, good teammate, good field general. You see the results of him, running an offense versus a Jordan Ivory Curry running the offense, or somebody else. UCF is going to have to hit the portal to find that next point guard to take over from. But I mean, replacing Darius Johnson is no easy feat. I mean, I said the same thing when BJ Taylor left. Replacing BJ Taylor, no easy feat. And eventually, it took a while that Johnson kind of started to fit the bill. Into maybe last year is when it really settled in. Before that, I mean, he was very hot and cold to try to replace BJ Taylor. So there will be another. It's just easier said than done to replace such a player.
Agreed. Look, after the break, we're going to talk about something that I want to revisit, and that's what went wrong for UCF this season. We've tried to answer this question a couple of times, but now that all the basketball is finally done, we're going to revisit that one more time after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until we found Game Time here at Locked On. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event goes closer. That's a nice little hack most people don't know about, Andrew. And with all their pricing, you see the total cost up front. No surprises at checkout. Here's why we love using Game Time. Last-minute deals are great. You can grab last-minute seats and save a ton in great zones. And you get to see your seats before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. Plus, the low price guarantee. This is key. If you don't ever have to worry about overpaying, you can buy with confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. What time is it? Game time. Andrew, what went wrong for UCF? What happened this season? Johnny Dawkins, by all accounts, had a talented squad at the one deep, right? We've talked about depth, and that's the obvious thing that we've talked about week in and week out here. But what do you think? What else do you think went wrong? Like, how did UCF end up a team that the pundits, everybody wanted so desperately to put into the NCAA tournament? They were 1 point away from beating national runner-up Houston. And listen, I watched Houston in person twice this season. I watched them when they played Auburn, and I watched them again in the Final Four. This was so close to something special. And if you're UCF, if you're a UCF fan, I think you have to be encouraged by how close you were. Sometimes there can be a razor thin line between calamity and sometimes a season for the ages. right? The season that nobody saw coming. And I think they were so close to the season nobody saw coming. They just couldn't get there. What happened? What went wrong for Johnny Dawkins?
One, some of the projects they brought in didn't pan out. Mikey Williams was a bust. JJ Taylor was a bust. These guys were brought in with high expectations and a lot of a lot of notoriety. They didn't pan out. They didn't deliver. Jalen Sellers, his injury kept him out basically all year but 3 games. That outside of your control, but that really played a difference. Imagine if he was one of the focal points of the offense instead of Keyshawn Hall. You'd have a very different turn of events. The other thing was, and this one, you could debate where it comes from, but UCF had a problem of closing out games. This could be the fact that their depth wasn't great. Again, injuries and guys who just weren't panning out in the second, unit. They lost to 8 against a ranked Arizona. They lost the 1 against Houston. They lost 4 against Kansas during the regular season. There were some very, very close games. And then they lost a couple games they shouldn't have, like against Oklahoma State and Colorado later in the year. They had the overtime loss against Kansas in the Big 12 tournament. Then the team changed. Keyshawn Hall out, Mikey Williams out, JJ Taylor out. Guys that did not pan out the way they wanted. And I've talked to some fans. I talked to fans, a couple fans from George Mason, and they're comment about Keyshawn Hall is the exact same thing that happened at UCF. It was Mishon. Didn't pass the ball. It was give me the damn ball. If Keyshawn Johnson played basketball, he'd be Keyshawn Hall. It's
okay.
But you got a different dynamic in the crowd. You also had a little bit of chance to recover. There was a long layover between the end of the conference tournament. It was almost 3 weeks, March 12th to April 1st. It was the difference between the start of the Crown and the end of the Big 12 tournament. So that break helped this team that had depth issues, heal up, get reset, because they knew, who was, I wouldn't say off the bat, but they knew who was coming and who was going, who was going to leave the program before the tournament and who was going to stick around. And Johnny Dawkins, aside from being a straight up good guy, and allowing players, some of these players to stick around, knew he had to because he needed the bodies, but he kept the players that fit the team dynamic. Tyler Hendricks and Niels Mahovsky. They helped with the team dynamic as opposed to Hall and Williams that really didn't. So this is a very different team that went into the tournament. You saw the real team, like what should have been in the tournament. And against Nebraska, they ran into a team that wanted it just as bad as they did. Villanova may not have been quite as there. Cincinnati may not have been quite as there, but Nebraska, they wanted this game bad, and it showed. And it's not a dig on UCF or anything like that. UCF still had a 20-win season. There's nothing to scoff at on that. But you win some, you lose some. And this wasn't a bad loss. UCF has had some bad losses. I mean, Nebraska was like 59th in the net or something to that effect, or 54th, somewhere around there. So I mean, it's not a bad team. Obviously, they would not have been in the NCAA tournament, but this wasn't a bad team. This is not like losing to Colorado, who had a net over 100. So it was a very different situation.
We had a long ride back from the Final Four, and my partner and my cameraman, we were all talking about next season and what teams have to do next season. And one of the things that was said during our discussion was talking about getting specific players, about having the horses. And the point that my business partner was trying to make was it's year in and year out, what we see is it's not necessarily the most talented collection of players that's making it the furthest. It's the best collection of players, the most cohesive collection of players, the guys who can buy into a system and know what their role is, right? And I'm not sure, you're saying this about Keyshawn Hall, and the more you say it, I think the more I start to agree with you. I'm not sure that they had some talented guys, but I'm not sure they had the right collection of guys to go further than they did, right? If you're Johnny Dawkins, I think that's what you have to fix going into next year is that everybody around you is going to be spending money, Andrew. They're going to be, and you're going to have to spend some money too, but you're also going to have to not just chase stars with the dollars. Don't throw money after stars. You're going to have to out-evaluate your peers, at least to some extent, in finding those guys who maybe got a little overlooked and but are talented, but fit your system better than some big 5-star fits, Bill Self system or Bruce Pearl system, or you know what I mean? I mean, Keyshawn Hall, let's be honest, while talented, could be an absolute disaster for Auburn, right? If you're Pearl, you have to build something that is not completely dependent on the success or failure of Keyshawn Hall. They also brought in another guy to that program, JP Pegues. I don't know if you remember, he hit a shot in last year's tournament, buzzer beater with Furman. And there was an expectation that he would come in and play really good minutes. And let me tell you something, he flopped pretty early. And JP Pegues is a great guy. Like, I mean, he was a team player. He played his role. He just wasn't very good. If you were Auburn, you just weren't in a situation where you were dependent on him to have a good season. They had like 3 guys that could run the point, one of which was a true freshman, and he was probably the best freshman in the country last year. I think if you're Johnny Dawkins, you just need the right collection of guys to give yourself that cushion. And that's what they got to fix going into next year. I've been adamant about this with Dawkins. I think he deserves another year to do that. I haven't heard any whispers, Andrew, and that's what I want to talk about before we move on, about moving on from Johnny Dawkins so far this offseason. And usually after that last basketball game is played, moves are made quickly. I think he's safe for now unless something changes. But, what have you heard in terms of Johnny Dawkins' job security?
Well, I mean, there's what I heard and what's practical. The practical thing is you can't fire him right now.
Right.
You just put together a 20-win season and finished runner-up in the second best tournament in the country. It's basically replacing the NIT. You came up runner-up in that. You can't fire him. This would be a Frank Solich moment. And let's be honest, UCF is not an overly attractive basketball job. In the earlier days of Division I, it was where careers went to die. Is it better than it used to be? Absolutely. But everyone knows that it's an uphill battle for the Knights as far as resources versus a lot of these other schools. Now, once this house settlement kicks in, which it hasn't yet, and it's still being worked out. There was a hearing yesterday. There's still work to be done before it can be finalized. If and when it gets finalized, will help UCF because they can't compete with, a school that can give Keyshawn Hall between $2 and $2.5 million, and not have restraint. That's why all these players have gone into the portal. They're getting front loaded right now is because, come July 1st, the game changes. And I think that'll actually play in favor of a less basketball rich program like UCF, where they can use those smart dollars, but everything, starts becoming a little bit more, on the up and up, where there's more transparency and there's, less, being able to stack the deck, because most of these schools are going to stack the football side, not so much the basketball side.
Right. Because
that's where the real money comes from is football success. So like an Auburn is going to invest more in football than they are in basketball. I mean, it's just common sense. I don't know any SEC program that would do the opposite. Kansas may do the opposite, but they're, Duke, maybe North Carolina, but for the most part, most of these other schools are going to put football first and foremost, and then basketball is the other guy. I mean, UCF's going to be no different, but at least it levels the playing field some. And you're right about the quality of players. You know, I always use the Florida versus Manhattan NCAA tournament first round game in 2004. Florida was a way better talented team, loaded with McDonald's All-Americans, and they lost because they did not play nearly as cohesive as a team, and you saw it on the floor. A lot of players playing more solo versus just a bunch of journeyman quality guys that just gelled well. That's one reason why UCF's 2019 run was so well. It was so good in results is because they had great team chemistry. They didn't need a top level all-star. I mean, they had good players, BJ Taylor, Aubrey Dawkins, Taco Fall, they all brought something to the table, but they complemented each other so well. And the egos were so small that, that they didn't have to play hero ball, and again, you say, the slight difference between the amazing season and the absolute catastrophe was that final shot in that game that went around and out, and then the tip did the same thing. It's no different. So Johnny Dawkins has rebuilt this team more than once. I mean, they've had double-digit new players over the last couple of years. So it's no new thing for Dawkins, but you can't fire the guy and expect coaches to want to come to UCF when you fire a guy who is beloved in the community, in the basketball world, just had a 20-win season and ended up runner-up in the Crown tournament. I mean, unless there's something underneath the surface, which as far as I know, there's no bad things outside of just, we wish we won more. There's nothing there. Fans are like, oh, we need to change. Well, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And you may be surprised at how few people actually want to come there. I think we're missing, the big picture here. It goes back to history. Johnny Dawkins has put together the best 3-year stretch that UCF's had in Division I. It's the only time they've ever gone to a postseason tournament 3 years in a row. They've never done it before. The closest they got was a couple of NCAA tournament bids, but that's because someone had to win the Atlantic Sun, and UCF horribly outgrew that league. They were on their way to Conference USA at that point. So, I mean, they outgrew the league, so they won. It's a low major, and the best seed they ever had in the tournament was 14th as a result. So, I mean, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to use that as a reason for changing because we made the NCAA tournament many times. Yeah, that's like, someone has to go. So it might as well be the biggest school in that conference. But UCF's only made the tournament as an at-large once. And Johnny Dawkins was that guy. So, I mean, you can't fire him at this point. I think, if he falls flat in his face next year, you've got some ammo, but you can't do it after a 20-win year like this.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I cover more than just basketball and football, and I can tell you. So one thing you'll hear me say often is that the resources need to match the expectations. So if you have an expectation that a coach should win championships in today's game, whether it's football or basketball or whatever, you need championship resources at your disposal if you want to compete consistently. Now, once a coach shows you that he's on the brink, now that's the time, in my opinion, to lean in, give him more to work with, and then see what he can do with it. And maybe that's a measured investment where you say, okay, we're going to give you, we talked about the pot that they have to work with. We now know that of the $20.5 million, if they, for argument's sake, they fill that $20.5 million pot, UCF will have $18 million to play with. You've got to decide what percentage of that you want your head basketball coach to steward. Right. And obviously, the more you win, the more access you will get to a percentage of that money. But I'm telling you, outside of football, everybody's going to be fighting for, if you're women's basketball, for example, you're going to have to show something before they just invest a bunch of money into you. Right. They're to put the money where the dollars are made. And that's football. But basketball is its importance in terms of what athletic departments do is growing nationally. And it is an absolute mistake, I think, if you have a coach who is on the brink of doing something special, to not give him the resources and see what he can do with it. Like I said, I'm okay with a measured investment. I'm not saying go all in on Johnny Dawkins, but I am saying maybe give him a little bit more to play with, help him get that star player. Or, we've talked about the idea of these programs needing true GMs where it says, look, I'm not going to give you $5 million to go out and get, the number one player in the portal. But what I will do is I'll give you $1 million to go out and fill your bench. Right. And hopefully you have a guy in the program who you've been developing for a couple of years that can step up and be your star. It's rare, having talked to athletes just as recently as this weekend in the locker room, for guys to stay at programs 4 years. Loyalty, it means something different these days, and the money has taken over. But look, there's going to be an ongoing discussion. Speaking of the money, players won something this weekend. We're going to talk about what they won next on Locked On UCF. What did they win? Well, let's talk about what they
money
won for a second. The winner of this tournament got $300K, a $300,000 NIL package. The runner-up received $100,000, and I think the semifinalists got $50,000. So
correct.
You had to make the semis to walk away with something. We had some questions about where's that money going? Is it going to the program? Looks like, for all intents and purposes, it was to be divided amongst the players. So Nebraska got $300,000 to divide amongst the players who participated in this tournament. Oh, what I have given to be a bench rider on Nebraska this past weekend. Assuming they split that evenly. I hope they split it evenly. But if you're a UCF, you had $100,000 to split amongst what we determined was 10 players. So 10 G's a piece, Poppy, for the UCF players that participated in this tournament. We had some questions about Nils Mahovsky and Tyler Hendricks competing in this one, although being in the portal. Now we know, hey, there was 10 grand on the line to play some extra basketball for them, and good for them, man. I'm glad that they got that. Is this a good idea? Is this whole let's play for a cash prize like it's a Monday night poker game? Is this a good idea? Is this a good idea, Andrew?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
It's the end of the year, give them something to compete for. Definitely kept players in the program. We've seen where, in football where a lot of players hit the portal and then had to back out. Marshall had to back out of a bowl game. So find a way to keep them going, give them an incentive, and winning cash is definitely an incentive. That's one reason why those Nebraska players were just, crazed about, winning this tournament. They got a good amount of money. And, let's assume, I don't know how many players off the top of the head that
I was going to say,
let's assume 10, that's 30 grand a player. I mean, that's a good payday. Yeah. So, the fact that UCF players walked away with $10,000 for playing a few extra games, hanging out with each other, because I'm pretty sure these guys like each other. You go through the trenches, you develop a deep respect for each other. The guys who are still there, I'm pretty sure are willing to work with each other, and so there's that camaraderie that comes with it, and also the sadness of, well, this is it. Players are leaving the program. This is it. Let's go out in a blaze of glory and get something out of it. And the other thing is, this was an expense pay tournament. This wasn't like pay for play like the CBI. No, it's nothing of that sort. So, they were able to go to Vegas. They didn't, the school didn't have to worry about the out-of-pocket portion. So you got a quality event out of this. The only thing, they need to work on is maybe get more fans in the stands. It was not a heavily attended tournament. Each round outside of the finals was in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. The finals had, I think, between 3,000 and 4,000 people in attendance. So not a huge amount, but again, this was all in a neutral site, and, maybe they can change things up for next year and find something better. As the announcer said, they expect this tournament to be around for a bit. I expect that too. Fox is bankrolling this, and they got the viewership that came with it, on FS1 and later Fox. And so it was to their benefit to do this and to utilize teams in their preferred conferences as a starting point, Big East, Big 12, Big 10, and then backfill with other teams, great. And the way they design their contract is it forces teams that want, say are like Ohio State. It's either you play in our tournament or none at all. And yeah, they said thanks, but no thanks. We won't play in any tournament. But at least the tournament is protected in the fact of they'll get that chance to bring in, that Big Ten team they want. And if they say no to everything. They're not at risk of losing them to the NIT.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I love this a lot. I think that players getting a chance to win, having something on the line, and more basketball for fans as well too. I'm all about fans getting more sports. As we know, if you're a football guy, longest off season in sports, from January to August. Whew, boy, that is a long 8 months. And I'll tell you now, with the way springs are going, where coaches are essentially de-emphasizing spring ball, right? Like they're just like, hey, we don't want to get hurt. We'd rather have OTAs than have, some meaningless spring game. It gives fans something to engage with that's meaningful during that time, and I love it, man. College baseball is also is resurgent right now. We're seeing, with the network deals that are flying around, we're seeing more emphasis on the Olympic sports. I love that. But for this, I like it. I like that if you put something on the line for the players, they will play like something's on the line, which means we get great basketball as fans.
And they have skin. They have skin in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, a great conversation, Andrew. We will turn our attention to the rest of the offseason for UCF basketball. If any news pops up, Locked On UCF will be right here to talk about what's going on. I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, as always, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew, and catch me on Last Word on College Football, a part of the Last Word on Sports family.
That's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Big 12. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.